Good morning, everyone. It's Saturday, which means it's time for yet another Salty Saturday morning. I am your host, Mr. Kadish, producer of the Salty Nerd Podcast. Get my name right. I deserve your respect. Anyway, I am so excited to get into today's topics because we're going to be talking about one of my favorite things to talk about, aka Zack Snyder. And joining me today to talk about Zack Snyder and a bunch of other nonsense is my fantastic panel of nerds, starting with Matt Vader74. How you doing, buddy?
I don't know. I haven't decided how I am yet today, and Mr. Snyder is not helping me feel good. All right, so
I know you were very optimistic. Yet we were full of Christmas cheer.
I was. It's a new movie, guys. Got a new IP. We're gonna have some new fun characters. Maybe we'll have some new toys to buy. Maybe some new fun stuff to talk about. And nope, we get giant space vagina queefing out of a spaceship in the first 10 seconds of the show. So no.
Indeed. Big lump of coal in your stocking. Huh?
Yes. Yes. It's terrible.
Yes. And he's here. He's queer. He's our gender non-binary Latinx shield against all things woke and intersectional. Brian from the podcast. How you doing?
Hey now. Yeah, Rebel Moon was awesome. I really enjoyed it.
Well, we're going to be talking about a lot more than Rebel Moon today. But before we get to that, we got to welcome back to the show Joe Esposito from the Ozone Nightmare Podcast. Joe, thank you so much for joining us once again.
Sure.
It's good to have you here.
Well, I might be the only person on this panel who enjoyed Rebel Moon because I came in with that many expectations for it, and at least it looked nice. And I love that somebody saw Space Battleship Yamato and said, let's copy that for our main battle cruiser. And I'm like, I'm here for that. So yeah, I'm ready to talk about it.
He copied way more than that. In fact, we did
way more, but that's a good one.
Well, we did a Salty Nerd podcast on 3 movies that he very blatantly ripped off. In fact, link is in the description if you guys want to check that out. But before we get into all that stuff, it's the Lord of the Pineapple, the King of the Shelves himself, Odin. How you doing, buddy?
Well, you know, I would be doing better, but I've watched like upwards of 5 hours of complete garbage over the last like 48-hour period when you add in not only Rebel Moon but also Aquaman, which I still haven't even finished that film. Good Lord. But yeah, I am doing okay. We're getting into the holiday season, family coming in literally in the middle of this stream. My wife's parents will be coming in, but luckily baby Thor's napping, so I've got a little bit of a cover there until I have to spend time with the in-laws. But
what time is cousin Eddie showing up?
No cousin Eddie. Luckily, it's just the grandparents for us. Okay. So
nice.
Yes.
Well, we do need to tell our fans that Brian has to hop out a little bit early today, so he's only going to be with us for around the first hour.
Sorry, guys.
Last minute. Appreciate him being here. Just need to give a shout out to everyone who showed up in the chat. We got Gary Bando Sandwich Worthington. Banjo Sandwich.
It's here.
He's got a great account on Critic List. Follow him.
He does.
Yes. We got Anthony Mark. We've got Danny's mom, Penny. We have Rec Films Montana, Mr. Farnsworth, Super Sticker Extraordinaire Gavin Blackburn. We got Dr. Cocho Dragon. Did he just get his PhD? I don't know. We also have Wendy Hunter, Jeffrey Young, and who else has shown up in the chat? We've got our regulars, Mexican Iron Man, along with the Joker's voice, Keely Chow, Quantum Cat 76. Guys, thank you all so much for being here today. Really appreciate you showing up in chat and on time. Then we've got our big shout outs to our top contributors. Guys, with the end of the year, this slate gets wiped clean. So there's a lot of opportunity here. But while 2023 is still in play, we have our top donator, William Forbus, still undefeated at $500 in one super chat. Then we have Scotty Dub, Bob Dorsey, and a special shout out to the AstroNerdBoy and our loyalist Joker's Voice and Mexican Iron Man. Thank you guys so much. And we also have our top gifters, WG and Jillian N, although we may have to add Bob Dorsey in there because he donated 50 Salty Nerd Super Chat or memberships, gifted memberships last time around. So big shout out to him as well. And of course, our top contributor of all time, Scotty Dub. Thank you so much for the support. Really appreciate you guys doing all that good stuff, all that good work, God's work, as a matter of fact. All right, guys, before we get into Rebel Moon, There's another thing that's been going around the internet that I want to talk about. And it is this. Go ahead.
Is it about getting naked on Twitch?
No.
Are we doing this? Are we doing this?
Let's not bring that up again. All right.
Are we getting naked?
No.
Okay.
I'd like to have one stream monetized.
I've been on this show for a year waiting for this moment. Come on, let's go.
I had firmly blocked last week's show out of my mind, and now I've been just reminded. And gotta start it over again.
Kind of going along with that, guys. There's been this big movement, especially on X or Twix, whatever you want to call it, to say that you can't do bad movies of the year lists anymore because people work really hard on these movies and they don't deserve to be exploited by listing them all together and talking about it. So, like, there was this tweet that went out today or a couple of days ago from Stephen Weintraub, and it says, "Please stop writing the worst movies of the year list. No one sets out to make a bad movie. So many people work their asses off to try to do the best job they can. So let's not celebrate something that doesn't work." And he was basically retweeted a lot by the lefty crowd, where it's like, this one guy, he says, "It's that time of year again where I say F your worst films list." In response to some of the idiocy in this thread, let me be very clear that negative film criticism and bad reviews are important. A bad movie deserves a bad review, full stop. Worst film lists are not that. They are all cynical and valueless. And of course, leave it to Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers to troll these guys and say, "Me and the boys getting ready to do our worst movies of the year list," with Alex Jones and an army of Alex Jones. Yep, getting ready to do this. So I wanted to ask you guys, do you think that this guy has a point where it's like, hey, these lists are exploitative, they're just, hammering home negativity and all this stuff? Or do you think we as movie fans and critics have a right to basically lump these things together and talk about all of them all at once? Now, Odin, I know that you are a professional movie reviewer. You're very well respected. You love pineapple. What's your take on this?
I don't think any of those things, I know for a fact the last one was not true, but I don't think any of them ended up being true. Yeah, I saw this, and all I was reminded of was back in the day when, he used to be a legitimate, credible, trustworthy movie reviewer. His name was Chris Duckman. When he decided, I'm not going negative anymore. I'm not doing my negative reviews anymore. And ultimately, the reason why was because he wanted to shill so that he could get in with Hollywood. And sure enough, he sold his soul and he got in, and he's been making now a movie, and who knows when it's actually going to come out. But whenever I see tweets like this or comments like this, I just think that's just the dumbest thing I've ever heard, right? If you can make a best of list, there's no reason for you not to also then be able to make a worst of list. Because even though he admits saying you can be critical of a movie and you can point out the flaws, it's like, well, that's the whole point of a worst of the year list too, is to say, yeah, these are the films that really either were not made well or should not have been made at all. Because there are films like that are still made. Even if you have $100 million behind a project, does not mean that it justifies its own existence just because some people worked hard. I do think it's important to maybe distinguish of, hey, it's the writers that I'm going after here, the directors. And that's typically what most people do, right? When they go after a movie, they're going after the story or the lack thereof a story, right? Or they're going after the performances. They're not going after the lighting team or the stunt team. And in fact, I know for mine, whenever I go after movies, I try to give at least some credit to the behind the scenes people when I can, because I know that ultimately they're doing everything they can. It's the creative minds that are going to make it and help make it good or not. But I will proudly say I already have a list going right now for the worst films of 2023. Right now, my top three, and right now there's no official order, but the top three of my film list is Barbie, Indiana Jones, Dial of Destiny, and Ghosted. And I have right now about 18 films vying for my top 10 worst films of the year. And so I will have an official list. And I might have to tag these people on Twitter about it, because Lord knows they will love that.
Yes, indeed. So Joe Esposito from the Ozone Nightmare Podcast, what do you think of this? Do you think it's fair for people to make lists of bad movies that came out this year? Or do you think that it's just beating a dead horse?
Listen, you can make a list of whatever you want, so I'm not going to tell anybody they can't do it. I think there is a difference between a bad movie list that actually is talking about why they think something's bad, and there are many lists that just jump on other people's reviews and say, oh, they thought it was bad, so I think it's bad, and it's like a pop culture zeitgeist thing. I don't do bad movie reviews generally anymore because I don't want to talk about them. There are bad movies. I've watched them, but I generally will just skip over reviewing them because I'd rather highlight people I want people to see. I don't want you to, if you want to watch bad movies, and I do, go ahead. There's plenty of shows that do that. I try to say, here's a great movie that nobody seems to know about or like, or they think it's bad, but here's the qualities about them that are good. Go watch it. That's just what I like to do. But I'm not going to tell somebody who, like Red Letter Media, does bad movie reviews constantly. Do I think they're wrong? No, it's hilarious. Do whatever you want. You are free to express your opinion. So no, nobody should be telling anybody else you can't make a list. Make a list. If you don't like them, don't read them. It's like TV or radio. If you don't like something, don't look at it. Don't listen to it. Go somewhere else. It's not a big deal.
Well, Brian from the Popcast, a lot of people worked really hard on these terrible movies.
I know.
And because of that, they deserve respect. It's not about the finished product. It's about the effort and time and hard work that went into such a terrible finished product. What's your take on this?
I had Taco Bell yesterday and spent a long time creating something in the bathroom. I deserve an award for it immediately. I want to be praised and loved for my amazing dookie that I produced in the toilet after my hard efforts of squeezing and pushing for about 30 minutes at least. It was very difficult.
I'm going to make a list of the top 10 fast food restaurants that make that easier for you to do, Brian.
Yeah, I would like that. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Listen, what is the point of creating something if it's just all going to be praised across the board? Didn't we do this already in like the mid 90s when all of a sudden everyone started getting trophies? No one was winning or losing. All these little leagues would come out and be like, the kids tried really hard, so here's your quote unquote participation trophy, and no one was honored for their hard work. And what happened was, over a period of 20 years, those people grew up and they became movie creators. And now they want their participation trophies, and that's not the way it works. When you're an adult, you get praised for doing good and creating something that's well received and loved, and you get criticized for being bad. And that is the way it works. And maybe you shouldn't be in the business if you're such a sensitive person that you can't handle a little bit of criticism when you destroy a 60-year franchise or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah, in what world do our movie makers unable to take criticism? I mean,
right?
There's an entire industry that was around way before the YouTube that was full of movie critics. It's crazy to me.
Matt, the crux of this argument is like, it's that time of the year where everyone does their top lists. Mm-hmm. And we shouldn't bother with the worst of the year because we already know that these movies are bad. So let's just focus on the good. But as Joe pointed out, like people like talking about bad stuff just as much as they like talking about the good stuff. In some cases, even more than that.
I would argue that we like to talk about bad stuff more than we like to talk about good stuff because talking about bad stuff is way more fun.
Well, it's not just more fun; it's a lot easier to do because there's more to talk about when it comes to the bad stuff.
If you tell me to put down 10 movies on a piece of paper that are good from 2023, I don't think I could do it. I really don't.
Yeah, there's like 6 total.
Yeah, and those 6 are probably questionable.
Right? Yeah, it's like they're good because they're surrounded by garbage.
So
this has been a bad year for movies.
A terrible year.
You look at Shane has a running list of every movie, every movie this year. He's watched almost every movie that's come out as a theatrical or a major streaming release, and he has a giant list that he ranks. And you look at that list, I'm like, bro, how is Dungeons and Dragons number 1 on your list?
Right. I mean, every list that I've seen, and everybody that I saw, they've all got stuff like Godzilla -1, which is a 3.5 star at most, in reality, whatever, Odin, and stuff like John Wick
right
4.
there. What poster's still up there?
It's a pile of trash. It's just these are
Godzilla -1 was great, but I think it was great good for me because I had gone through. I've had this like drought of proper entertainment.
Exactly. It was good because it didn't have a lot to compete against. You know what I'm saying? It's
also, it's really good, everybody.
Yeah, it
Sorry.
is good. I'm not saying it's bad.
It's phenomenal.
But it's not.
in fact.
It's not a 5-star movie. I'm sorry, guys. It's not.
So what is a 5-star movie this year?
Maybe there isn't one. There might not be
Wow.
one out.
So what's your top? What's your top one this year?
I don't know, dude.
Is it Rebel Moon? I bet it's Rebel Moon.
Oh, yeah, Rebel Moon.
For
It
me,
might
it was-
be Godzilla. It might be
was
Godzilla
probably
minus
Dungeons and
one.
Dragons. It was like
Like
Dungeons and
3.5
Dragons,
stars.
Godzilla, a couple other ones.
Here's another thing about why I would actually like there to be bad movie lists. I often decide to watch movies by going to IMDb and looking at movies that have polarized reviews. I want to see ones that have 10 stars and 1 stars and no middle. And that to me means, okay, there's something in here. And a lot of those movies are movies that people think are bad and they're actually great. It's just that some people want everything to be Marvelized and the same. And some people appreciate movies like Strike Commando, which is awesome. If you've never watched it, is it technically the best action movie ever made? Well, yes, it is. But even if it isn't, it's very entertaining. So you should go watch it. Now, you look at the reviews for that, they're not going to be the same as they are for, say, First Blood or Rambo or First Blood Part 2, Rambo. But it's still a great movie and people hate it. And I love it. So that's the beauty of it. Everybody likes something different. So I welcome these lists. Bring them on.
My favorite version of the bad movie, like that is universally understood to be bad, but people love it anyway, is The Room. Like that is still one of my favorite films ever made. And yet I am also willing to admit that the film is just objectively terrible. So
Hey, Tommy Wiseau worked really hard on that.
exactly.
movie.
That's also one of the comments say that too. Yeah.
Yeah. But you know, it's funny. It's like if you go to a restaurant and you get E. coli and you're in the hospital and you're dying, are you going to say, well, the cook worked really hard on that dish, so I'm just going to give him credit while I lie here dying? Like this concept that like just because people worked hard on something, therefore they deserve credit for it, doesn't really compute with me, because you got to judge the finished product, right? Like you could work really hard building an airplane, but if that airplane crashes and kills 200 people that were on it, like, you know, all the hard work wasn't
the pilot's
really for
fault.
anything.
It wasn't the plane's fault. It was the pilot's fault.
Yeah, something like that.
But that's also the point that was made earlier about criticize the people who are actually making something bad. If the VFX are great, well, then that person did their job correctly. They can't be held responsible for a movie that has no story and no direction. So I'm okay with the idea that, okay, that doesn't mean everybody that worked on something is garbage, because often the directions of movies are writers, producers, directors. That's the people who generally steer most of it. So if the effects are good, sure, say the effects are good. But if the movie is boring, it's still boring. And you can say, great effects, movie was boring, which might be coming into alignment with something we'll be talking about soon. I don't know. That's just maybe a
I want to ask you guys real quick, if you had to pick the worst movie you've seen all year, what would it be? Odin, what do you think the worst movie of the year is?
I just picked up my list again because there's a lot of very big contenders out there. If I was going to be honest, though, like as far as like just the movie itself, there was a film I saw called Ghosted, and I think it was on Apple TV. Was exclusive with it. Was Chris Evans was in it, and Ana de Armas was in it too. It was just bad.
I'm
like
sorry,
in
but the
every
level
way.
of attractiveness gave that at least 1 star. It's true. Like even if it was bad, like 1 star was added to that for how attractive the cast was, and I can't do anything about that.
Oh, okay.
All right, Joe Esposito, what's your worst movie of the year?
Is Ant-Man from this year? Quantumania, was that this year?
That was this
Yeah,
year.
that's
Yeah,
it.
that's a
Because
good
you
one.
killed MODOK, and I didn't think that was possible. Thanks for killing MODOK, you bastards. That's it, easily.
Brian from the Popcast, your take on the worst movie of the year.
Easy. Killer of the Flower Moon. I hated that movie so much. It was so boring. I think I fell asleep like 6 times. It was like 4 hours long or something. Oh my God. The only thing good about that movie is the acting was solid, but everything else was just so bad. The pacing was bad. It was even hard to follow. Oh, I hated that movie so much with a bleeding passion. The next day, I literally called Shane. I woke him up out of a dead sleep and cursed him out for making me go see that stupid fucking movie.
Matt Vader 74, what was your worst movie of the year?
You know, I'm going through I started a list on Letterboxd a while ago that I didn't really keep up over the last month or so since we switched to Critic List. But there's a couple of winners on here that I completely forgot about that I watched. There's a there's a couple movies that Kylo Ren, who's the Kylo Ren actor?
Adam Driver.
Adam Driver made. One is 65.
Yeah.
That is a giant piece of crap. And there's another one that I think was, I don't know if it was a Netflix or a theater. It was called White Noise. I don't know if you guys watched that. It was a weird movie. It was just took me forever to get through. And of course,
well, now I am interested.
Yeah, it was. He's like a professor, and they have like some kind of weird train explosion event, and it's just a weird, goofy, awful movie. I hated it.
I'm going to note that movie real quick in the background.
Yeah, it's called White Noise. Yeah, not good. Like I didn't enjoy it anyway. And there's the cinematic masterpiece Meg 2 that was out earlier this year. That was super fun. So yeah, I mean it's not hard to find bad movies in 2023. All right. So, and I still never have watched Barbie, so I don't have an opinion on that one. But HBO really wants me to watch it. If you go to your Max app, it's just like it's just all over the place. It's gross. So. Yeah.
Well, it was definitely one of the bigger box office hits of the year. What's funny is like in terms of like movies that were theatrical releases this year, I tend to block out the ones that are like truly terrible. Yeah. But I'm going to go with Blue Beetle because talk about a disappointing movie that just didn't go anywhere. Like that was. That was a rough one for me to watch, so I'm going to name that one as my worst of the year. I
think I have a problem with movies that I think I'm not going to like. I just don't bother to go spend money and watch them anymore. Yeah. So I haven't seen Blue Beetle. I haven't seen Barbie. I know I can watch them for free right now, and I probably will here very soon. But I just can't comment on them because I haven't seen them yet. So.
A disappointing superhero movie, you say? Huh?
Yeah.
23.
Indeed. And I didn't see the Marvels, so there's one caveat to that review. So.
Another one. And I should make a list of movies I haven't seen because I knew they were going to be terrible to begin with.
I am going to see that one because I've heard from people that I know both sides of this. Yeah. Great fun, awful. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's it. That's what I want to hear.
All right, guys. Real quick. Just want to let everyone know that our goal for memberships this stream is 10 new members. So if we can get 10 members signing up during the course of this stream, it will be a great Christmas present. Really appreciate that. And also, if you guys wouldn't mind giving us a rating on Apple's podcast, give us a 5-star. We're trying to get as many of those as we can so that when Rotten Tomatoes opens up their application process this coming year, we can get accredited as official movie reviewers.
They're never going to let us in.
Yeah, probably not. But we also want to let everyone know that if you're not a part of our Discord, go check out saltynerddiscord.com. That gives you an invite to our server. We have a very active community over there. A lot of people chatting about movies and all that good stuff. So be sure to check that out and become an SJW, Salty Justice Warrior. That should be on everyone's New Year's list is to become an SJW. So. Real quick, we got a couple super chats I want to get to before we move on to our Rebel Moon review. So Mexican Iron Man, a very rare $4.99 super sticker. Thank you, Mexican Iron Man. Really appreciate that. And the Joker's voice for $10. Thank you, Joker. Hail SMP and Merry Christmas, everyone. Rebel Moon is not Zach's attempt at Star Wars. It's his attempt at Disney Star Wars. Now I'm off to see Aquaman. At least the Snyderverse has come to an end. #keep talking. That's a very good distinction. There is a difference between Star Wars and Disney Star Wars.
Yeah, but then Joker's going to spend money on Aquaman.
Yep,
I'm going to spend money on Aquaman.
I'm not spending.
Everybody likes what they like. Spend your money how you see fit.
I know Joker. He's spite watching this movie.
I took my kids to see it. The kids really enjoy the movie. Adults not.
And Doomed for $20. Are you going to go see The Iron Claw?
That's a movie I do want to go see.
So good.
Yeah.
To be honest,
I've heard good things.
It's one of those films where the more I think about it, the more likely it is going to be the number one film of the year on my list, probably.
Really?
I know the backstory to that mostly, and to watch this film is something I'm actually looking forward to.
And so I didn't actually know it because that's a little bit before the time that I started watching wrestling, and so it was really cool just to get to know those characters. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I had no idea these things happened. So, yeah,
there's a lot of drama in the real world of professional wrestling.
Yeah, I like to
It's
describe it.
pretty interesting.
If
A lot of it.
I had to describe the film, I would say it's a drama for men.
Yeah.
And we don't have a lot of those these days, I feel, right? Because a lot of dramas are for like chick flicks, that kind of thing, right? This is a drama for men. And so I think that...
I mean, professional wrestling in its core is soap operas for guys.
Oh, yeah.
So
It's true.
You know,
Gladiatorial soap operas.
that's it.
Good
That's
stuff.
what it is.
All right, guys. So the time has come to talk about Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon. Yes, the thing everyone has tuned in to talk about. First, I want to read this fantastic description of the movie from our good friend Data Racer over on Twix. He summed it up as such. So Rebel Moon is about a farm girl whose adoptive parents are killed by a fascist military empire, and that's her call to adventure. So she goes right to the bar at the spaceport city, has to fight an aggressive half-alien criminal at the bar in order to impress the mysterious rogue who has a small space freighter and agrees to take her to some planet on his ship. Oh, and the sorting out of a general to help her fight the fascist military empire. And the only reason she's not a giant Mary Sue is because she had a 15-minute montage flashback of her doing stuff. So bang up job writing there, Zach. Never seen this story before, laughing my ass off. So that was Data Racer's very accurate synopsis of this movie. And since Brian has to leave us early today, I want to throw this to him first and foremost. Brian, tell us what you thought about Rebel Moon, and don't hold back. Give us your honest.
It's the slow motion's great.
Yeah,
I
really
love
good
that.
slow motion.
Yeah, cool slow motion.
Mm-hmm.
The effects are cool. VFX pretty cool.
He's very good with the blurs.
Yeah,
the blurs.
Yeah, I'm trying to say all the good stuff. My favorite part, and this is sarcasm, is when during the gang rape part where it's like one of the, I guess the 2 times they decided to like sexually assault a character, and then at some point the big boss comes in and you think he's gonna break it up, and he's like, me first, and you're like the movie was just a sort of a hodgepodge of a lot of other stories that have already been told before, and there was too much going on. There's too many characters, too much story. Too much was pushed into this small, it's not even a short movie, but this short time. You needed more time. I feel like there may be a good story here if it was like a miniseries, maybe 8 episodes or something like that, where you can actually, sort out the whole story and really explain the characters and their motivations and whatnot. A lot of the stuff just sort of happened out of nowhere, and it happened very quickly. And there's just too much going on. The movie it definitely is a Zack Snyder film, dude. It like has all the typical, Zack Snyder stuff. And while I usually really enjoy that, this movie, I feel like he tried to do way too much with it. And again, a lot of this, I've already seen this story before. We've seen this story a few times in multiple movies that have already come out. Lastly, Shane made this point that I thought was great. Like the whole point is like they got to get together this group to like destroy this dreadnought or whatever. But there's like thousands of dreadnoughts. Like it's a massive sprawling empire. It's like, all right, this whole movie is like, we're going to solve this problem, but it's not even a scratch.
That's the whole point. It doesn't make any sense from any level.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't.
It's like these guys are worried about 10 bushels of wheat from the Amish space Vikings. I mean, who gives a shit? I mean,
yeah,
they can probably grow more than that on their spaceship
on their
whatever, in their greenhouse on the ship somewhere that nobody cares about if it's actually there or not. It's just a weird plot point of the movie.
Yeah, it was just it was real busy, a lot going on, and like logic, like Matt just said, like it didn't make sense logically. The whole movie felt like too much was going on, and it didn't really matter what happened. And that's sort of a bummer. And you know what? It's interesting how I said this last week. Zack Snyder is just so aggressively arrogant that he called the movie Part 1. Like, let's see how it goes with this movie before you give it a guaranteed sequel. But I don't know.
Yeah, who was the Child of Fire anyway? That didn't really make a lot of sense to me.
I don't know.
Like, whatever happened to just starting off with a movie called Rebel Moon and then adding titles
Let's just
to
do
it.
Rebel Moon and then Rebel Moon 2 and 3 if it works.
But the thing is, Brian, this is just half the movie. So like part 2 is actually just like the rest of the movie.
I want to know if Zach got together with Joss Whedon over dinner at some point, and Joss said, "Hey, you know what's really cool? Space colonies with horse-drawn plows."
Didn't we do this already?
Yeah, it's the dumbest shit ever.
And we did this already. It's called Firefly.
Western frontier people in the far future with a space colony a few miles walk away, and they're out there flying spaceships around, but yet these primitive primates are over here sowing their fields with fucking horse-drawn plows. It's the most dumbest, ridiculous thing I've ever seen. It's why I hated Firefly. It's like you have an old West motif in the far-flung space.
Oh, hold up, though.
Did you just say you hate
Firefly
Firefly?
had that motif, but they had technology.
Yeah, it's terrible.
No, they used technology. It was a mashup. It was a proper mashup, dude. By the way,
the first scene you see of these people is a horse-drawn handheld plow,
and that's a good criticism.
Okay,
for Rebel Moon, but Firefly,
insane.
you didn't see a horse-drawn plow.
Get out of here!
No, it was a levitating buggy,
Firefly, which is a beloved science fiction property.
Oh, I hate Firefly. I hate it.
Guys, hold on. We already
I
had
hate
Adam
you, Matt Vader. I hate you.
That's all right.
We already had Adam Baldwin tell Matt Vader how wrong he is about all this stuff.
I'm not wrong.
Do we have a clip on that? I want to see that.
It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to be wrong.
We have a whole interview of him doing it. But real quick, I will point out that to the movie's credit, they did say that settlement, they have a religious reason for not using technology to work the land. It's about being connected to the land, and therefore they shun the technological advances of most civilizations. So they did point that out in the movie. But Brian, was there anything else you wanted to tell us about your opinion on Rebel Moon?
I'll expand on what Vader said real quick. You're right. The whole backwoods settlement using, horses or whatever. It doesn't fit with like the entire the point of the movie and where it's supposed to be at what time. Go to Home Depot. Grab a plastic spreader or something.
Even Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru had, land speeders and droids and stuff working the moisture evaporators.
If you go with that motif, you got to add in some technology that reminds us that's in the future. Like maybe a levitating instead of a horse, maybe it's pulling a plow, but it's not the horse. It's like a levitating, a mechanical thing. I don't know. You got to throw in that kind of motif. That steampunk motif.
With the doors, because they had Star Trek doors. But that's all they did. So that's all. You're right. There should have been more like floating lights or something.
Yeah, to remind us that we're in the future, and it's not like my cousin's, Amish farm in the middle of Oka.
As you mentioned, it's subtle. It's very subtle how they show that futuristic. Because even I would say the tools, if you look at them, they're clearly that we can tell what they're trying to be. Like as far as like typical 2023 Earth tools. But they've been changed slightly to look more alien or to look just slightly different.
They've been painted with chrome paint.
Yeah, or just it was a hammer, but in reality it was a different kind of shape to it, even though it was still exactly what you would think.
Did the Viking space Amish people that reject all technology? Did they swim through space there? Did they arrive there on a highly advanced space going?
A lot of logic issues in this.
Special.
I agree.
Ship, it's just come on. It's just the dumbest thing.
All right. Well, I want to throw this to Joe because he's already come out and said that he enjoyed it. So, Joe, what was your take on Rebel Moon?
Yeah, the story is completely unoriginal. So if you're coming in expecting anything new narratively, no, it's not. It's a blender of basically Star Wars, Dune, and a third movie, which now I'm forgetting about, with designs that are stolen from all over the place. And that's okay with me because Star Wars was ripped off of Japanese films in many ways. So I'm not going to get hung up on that. But yes, don't come in this expecting a new IP with new ideas. It's not. And that's Zack Snyder. He tends to just take things and try to make them visually interesting. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I thought a lot of this, except some of the action scenes, were slow. They were weirdly slow. They should have sped them up a little bit, but a lot of the VFX I liked. I thought that the one thing, because I was like, okay, there's nothing in here that's going to surprise me. About the hour mark, I realized, yeah, I'm not going to be surprised by anything. But then when, what's the actor's name? Charles Hynen, who I don't know how to pronounce his last name. The Han Solo stand-in. When he turned on them, that actually surprised me because I thought it was following the coloring book so much that I didn't pick up on the fact that, oh, no, he's going to be the one who turns. And I'm like,
spoiler,
was that intentional? It can't be. That was an accident that they surprised me because they didn't follow every line of the coloring book all the way. But I had a good time with it. It's like eating a box of Nerds. I know there's nothing to it, but I enjoyed it while I was eating it. So that's what this movie is. It's a box of Nerds for nerds, I guess.
Yeah, guys, let's try to avoid spoilers when we're doing our reviews here.
That's one of the biggest ones too.
Yeah, that's the biggest one too.
I'm really sorry, everybody. I didn't even think about it when I said that.
I doubt there's many people
one
watching
of those people
that would care about whether it's spoiled or not. But obviously, yeah.
So Odin, what's your take on Rebel Moon?
Oh, it sucks. It really, honestly, just sucks. And I really say this because you kind of already could tell that it was going to suck based off of how it's been or already talked about early on by the people behind the scenes. They gave us an incomplete movie, right? Like they went in with the understanding of, we want you to make a PG-13 cut so that we can then later on give a Snyder cut R-rated version that fleshes out all of the mistakes and fleshes out all of this or that. And we all know from the previous Snyder cut that, okay, yeah, it fixes issues, but it doesn't fix all of them. And in fact, I think it just makes it a longer dredge through what is already a long Zack Snyder, lack of inspiration product. So just going into that alone, as soon as the movie started, I'm like, okay, I already know I'm not going to get a complete story here. I already know that things are not going to get fleshed out. And sure enough, everything felt like it was just jumping from one thing to the next. I would see characters on screen and say, who are they? Why are they important? What is their relevance? Oh, okay. I even mentioned before the stream that I looked up just a quick synopsis before getting started. And when I read the synopsis, I said, oh, I had no idea that's what the movie was about. I was like, oh, that's the name of that world, or oh, that's the name of what's going on. The world building in this film, I think, is just garbage from a writing standpoint. I think that there are some visuals in there, and this is always what people who are usually fans of Snyder appreciate are the visuals. But even the visuals in this film, right, there are some that I think are definitely commendable. So I think the visual effects teams at times are worth being commending. But then you've got one scene, or several scenes in fact, but the one that sticks out is you have this random basically space Yahtzee, and he's having some type of romantic relationship with a squid,
some kind of tentacle creature,
some type of tentacle thing. And the way the tentacles go over him, you think to yourself, this is the dumbest decision I think I've ever seen in a big budgeted film. And that's saying something.
That looked
because it looks atrocious. You're like, this looked like someone on their home computer with very like a year's worth of college experience. No, a year's worth of high school experience designed these tentacles to show up on him. It looks awful. And it was laughably bad. And so I looked at moments like that. I'm reminded that this is not the final cut. And all I can think of is this movie is stupid. Right? This movie is just bad because they release it on purpose to be incomplete so they could have their own Snyder cut, trying to create this AstroTurf, basically, right, of the whole release of Snyder cut stuff. And so what we got was an incomplete movie that, as you all have mentioned already, borrows from so many other properties that did it a lot better. One of my favorite connections, and it kind of stuck with me as I was watching it too, is that the beginning is just like A Bug's Life. I think it may have been Quarterblack Garrett who said that, or that's where I saw it from. But I'm like, oh my gosh, you're so right. Because what is she going out to get? Bigger bugs. Yeah, I hated this movie.
It's God, well, I forgot what I was going to say, but it's just people like us out this here, probably most people in the chat can watch a movie like this, and we can every 5 minutes we can go, oh, he stole that from this movie. Oh, he stole that from that movie. And to me, I want to see something new and original, and I don't know if it's even possible for that to happen anymore. It's just like Is it so hard for these creators to give us something new, or to at least take something old and put a new spin on it? Because when I can sit here and watch this movie and I can go, oh, that guy's Darth Vader, that guy's the Emperor, this guy is Luke Skywalker, that's that's Han Solo, so now I'm expecting a Chewbacca to come along, or something, and then I go, oh, this is just a ripoff of Star Wars mixed with that stupid John Boy movie with the ship with the giant titties. It's just it's ridiculous. And
not just ripoffs, sea level ripoffs.
Yeah, just like
discount store level ripoffs.
First grade level writing class ripoffs. And it's like something I could write. You know what I'm saying? That's how bad it is.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the stuff that we recognize, younger people just don't. They're never going to watch Star Wars, so they have no awareness of it outside of pop culture stuff. I don't think they care that we know it. I really think that's part of it. Is like, you guys know it.
And I'm not saying George Lucas took a lot of stuff. We all know he had influence and stuff from other movies. I mean, but I don't look at that. I don't watch Star Wars and go, oh, he's ripping off Kurosawa or something like that. Even though I didn't know that then, I still don't think that now watching it. You know what I'm saying? So, but this movie is just a blatant ripoff, probably scene for scene in some aspects of movies that we all love. So I don't know. It just seemed really, really bad. And I had hope for this. I wanted this to be good. I mean, you guys all heard me on this show on Saturday mornings and on the Tuesday show. It's like, let's just wait till it comes out. Why are you trashing? Why are you shitting on this thing now for? But you were right. Kadish, you were right. I have to say that this time, this is the only time I'm ever going to say that, unless, but you were right. This is a big pile of steaming crap. And it's upsetting because I wanted it to be good. I was looking forward to a new IP to be able to get behind. I was, and I can't do it here. So guess I'll go back to legendary Godzilla movies, whatever.
I will say that since this movie was announced for years, I've been saying that it's just going to be a remake of Battle Beyond the Stars.
Mm-hmm.
Been saying that consistently for years.
Yeah.
And I was very happy to be proven right once more.
Did you see the ship? The ship was in the movie. That ship design was in the movie. There is a very blatant thing where the Battle Beyond the Stars ship comes across the screen. I almost forgot to mention that. It's there.
I did not see that.
Sharpened, but it's there.
Is that the same?
It's there.
Is that the same thing? Because I heard someone mention that there's it's like an anime or something where it's almost a beat, like it's almost like a shot for shot taking.
That's Battleship Yamato.
Yeah, that's the big main ship, but there's a part where there's ships flying around, and one is the Battle Beyond the Stars, and then there was another movie that also used it, which I don't remember. That ship is there; it's just kind of sharpened a bit, but it is absolutely. I think it's when it turns, you can see it. It's the same ship.
Nice.
I think that was when the rebels showed up on that weird squid planet.
I think you're right,
place.
And it's there. So,
and that's fine. And that's to me something like that. That is an homage. That's something like, hey, I'm putting this little thing in this movie that the hardcore nerds are going to kind of notice. It's like, putting the Millennium Falcon in the background of a Star Trek movie kind of thing. I kind of appreciate that kind of stuff, but I just can't with this movie. It's terrible.
Well, I'm probably going to say something that's going to surprise a lot of people, but I'm kind of with Joe on this, where my expectations going into this movie were so in basement level, like just so low, that I was able to basically just enjoy it for what it was, because I just knew going in it was going to be dumb as hell. And so I actually had a good time watching this movie. But, by the end of the movie, I was like, oh yeah, I feel like I enjoyed myself. But as you go back and you start thinking about things, it's like so blatantly obvious, like all how problematic this movie is. And it is a half a movie, right? It's like the ending should have been kind of like the bad guys lose, because technically that's the midpoint of this story, right? That's the reversal, if you're looking at it from a meta narrative perspective. And so now that they've already beat the Darth Vader character, it's kind of like, well, when they go up against him again, it's like, well, they've already beaten him. So where's the tension here? And there are a couple of things I want to talk to you guys about that, from a narrative perspective. But the big thing I want to talk about is something Odin already kind of touched on, which is Netflix's strategy here. So they go to Zack Snyder and they're like, okay, we want you to make the R-rated Star Wars movie that you have in mind. But before we release that, we want a family-friendlier PG-13 version that we can use to sell, merchandise with, or whatever the hell it was. Instead of just letting him be Zack Snyder and put out like a 3-hour, 4-hour opus, right? They're like, okay, you can make half a movie, you have to make it for a broad general audience. Then you can make your other half of the movie, you have to make that for a broad general audience, and then you can do your director's cut. And Zack Snyder has come out and basically said, hey, my cut of this movie is a completely different movie than the one that you got. It's not just a longer version of this movie, it's a completely different movie. And it just makes me question Netflix's strategy behind this, because like we all know, like, yeah, they want people on the platform longer, they want to stay subscribed, they want to give people something to look forward to. But if Game of Thrones taught us anything, it's that adult franchises can be licensed the hell out of, they can sell a ton of merch, they can cross over into the comic books and video games, and they can do all the verticals. So why limit Zack Snyder of all people to doing a PG-13? I mean, this is the same thing that happened to him at Warner Brothers, where basically they put him in charge of their big comic book properties and said, you can't do R-rated stuff. And Zack Snyder's like, but I'm an R-rated director. And they're like, we don't care, you can't do R-rated stuff. And so like they basically hobbled him over there, which was the whole reason behind the Snyder Cut, right? But now on Netflix, they're like, you can do whatever you want, but give us the dumbed down version of this first. And it's confusing for audiences.
It doesn't make sense.
It already shot themselves in the foot by having this version out first instead of like Snyder's version of it. So Odin, give me your take on why Netflix is going with this strategy.
I think I mentioned the word before. It's AstroTurf, right? Where in the case of the Snyder Cut, there was, I think, a lot of just this natural, just very organic growth of a fan base that was all about trying to get this film to get released, right? And eventually they were able to get that done. And so what Netflix, I think, got from this one is, okay, well, obviously we can't do the same exact thing because we actually want to and can let you do whatever it is that you want to. But we want to kind of create this AstroTurf of, oh, here's the PG-13, but we'll have the Snyder Cut version. And they want to basically for like what SEO and just for that recognition, because anytime someone looks up Zack Snyder or Snyder Cut, not only will you get, of course, Justice League, but now once that other version gets released, you'll also now get Rebel Moon 2. It's also, I think, even more so to do with the fact that because of the way that they release their content, this is their way of trying to essentially keep people on their platform longer. Because they're like, hey, you want to see the latest Snyder film? Oh, here it is. But you got to stay on the platform for at least another month, because usually people will do what? They get their 1 month free trial or whatever it is that they get, and then they cancel it. Well, now they have to, if they want to get it again, if they want to get the extended version, if they want to get the Snyder Cut, they have to stay on for another month or two, whatever length of time. I don't think it's going to be that long before it's eventually released. So I think it's a strategy in that way, and it might work to get a lot of the Snyder Bros who are already obsessed, already bought in, already dialed in, because they're going to do anything no matter what, as long as Snyder's name is attached to it. But as far as other people, like, yeah, it's going to confuse them. Or for people like me, it's just going to tick me off and say, okay, so you just admitted you gave an incomplete film, which is going to explain why the film sucks, narratively speaking. But then when the actual film itself gets the full version, because he's always struggled with narrative, even when he has had full control, it's still not going to fix the issues. It's just going to be a longer R-rated version. So yeah, it just ticks me off in every way.
It just dawned on me that we're going to have to put up with another year of people saying the word Snyder Cut every other sentence. It's like, Snyder Cut. It's the Snyder Cut. The Snyder Cut that.
Well, I want to throw this to Brian, because Brian, Netflix has done the strategy before, most notably with Kevin Smith's Masters of the Universe thing, where they'll release like half the season and then they'll make you wait like 6 months before you get like the other half, and it just completely kills the momentum of everything. And it seems like they're doing the same thing here, where they're giving us the first half of this movie, and then they're like, okay, in April you get the second half of this movie. And it's just kind of like, why not just give us the full movie to begin with? I don't understand their strategy here. What's your take on it?
No, yeah, I think you're right. I think they might be there might be something artificial here, where they're like, manufacturing the same exact excitement that the legitimate Snyder Cut brought, and going like, let's do our part 1, part 2, and then we'll come out with another one in like 6 months when people are clamoring for the extended version of this or whatever. And here's the both parts together, and it's 5.5 hours long or whatever, in some insane director's cut. The funniest part about this is like the whole director's cut bit makes sense when it's a big studio and, you know, a creator, and, you know that the studio had involvement, but like Netflix didn't tell Zack Snyder what he could and couldn't do. So we already seeing the director's cut. And so if we got another version of it, it's just going to be his next try. It's like take 2. It's not a director's cut. Like, this is the director's cut. He's gotten to do whatever he wanted in this movie.
It's a director's cut.
It is a director's cut. Right.
Isn't every movie a director's cut in some sense?
Well, according to Zack Snyder, his version of this movie is so different, it's almost like it takes place in an alternate timeline. So, I don't know how he was able to cobble this one together, but I want to throw this to Joe. Joe, you know, if you hire Zack Snyder, let Zack Snyder make what Zack Snyder wants instead of like putting constraints on him. Otherwise, don't hire Zack Snyder. Hire a different guy, right? So why do you think Netflix decided to go with this strategy?
Well, I agree with what everybody else has said about this is clearly a strategy Netflix is, I think, employing. Whether Snyder was on board fully or not doesn't really matter. I think this is Netflix's idea on how to do stick around, there's another part coming. It doesn't make a lot of sense because it's an incomplete movie, as everybody said. It's weird because without spoiling anything again, sorry, everybody, there is a logical point where this movie could have stopped and then had a post-credit scene to set up a part 2, which is weird that they didn't do that. I kind of expected that. It didn't happen the way I thought it would. But what I'm wondering is him saying it's a completely different movie makes me wonder, is his part 1 3 or 4 hours long where some of these scenes that felt very rushed are longer? I guess it could be because the Snyder cut was how much longer than the original Justice League? It was at least an hour longer, right? Am I wrong about that? It was significantly longer, wasn't it? Or am I misremembering?
Yeah.
So
it was much
the thing about that, though, is the Snyder cut the first time made sense because he didn't get to finish his movie, and the movie that got finished by somebody wasn't good. That doesn't really track for this one as far as a promotion strategy. Oh, yeah, here's the crappy version. Come back later for the good one. What? Why? Right. It's weird. It's weird. I don't get it either. It makes no sense from Snyder's perspective. I guess he doesn't care, or he's got a plan, maybe. Netflix, I don't know that this is a good strategy. But then again, a lot of Netflix stuff doesn't make sense to me now.
Yeah, Matt Bader, you were looking forward to this.
I was.
And it was one of those things where by the time you got to the end of the movie, do you feel like you got a complete movie?
No, it's half a movie. It's half a movie for sure. It's just they spent the whole time giving us exposition dumps about the girl's past and moving at lightning quick speed from one character to the other, and their little adventures that they had to go through to get through each one. But weirdly, I don't know anything about all these other characters except one was a general. I think Perseus, the guy that tamed the flying hawk thing. What's his name? I don't know. I got big.
No, call him Perseus. That's great.
Yeah, Perseus.
No,
That's I got Clash of the Titans vibes off that, for sure. And the kung fu sword lady that didn't have lightsabers. They're just like really hot
Nemesis
blades.
But I loved her, man. Her
she was pretty cool.
Great.
But I don't know.
She walked on. It was like, whoa.
It's just like we went from like on the ship to her fighting the spider lady for reasons. I guess I don't know. I didn't understand how we would get from one character to the other. And so asking me if we got a complete movie, it's like no, we absolutely did not get a complete movie. And what's the Snyder cut going to be? Are we going to get a 30-minute build up before each character joins the crew to explain who each character is? Maybe that's what they should have done with your idea with this should have been a 10-episode Netflix series. We could have gone into and explored each of these characters a little bit more, give them a little more depth and a little more a buy-in on an emotional level for when one of them maybe doesn't make it, we care a little bit. I don't care about any of these characters. If they all died at the end, I would have said, whatever.
You want emotion? The Snyder Cut's going to give you 10 minutes love scene with those tentacles. That's what's going to give you.
I did, I thought there was some interesting stuff in this movie. I really liked, like when they went to Mos Eisley at the beginning on their horse. You remember that? Then they went into the cantina. There was this really cool scene where there was like this giant tick who was like had his tentacles in the dude, and it was like a parasite tick kind of thing, and the whole way that the tick was using its victim to communicate through I think that was almost my favorite thing in the movie, because it was the one thing that I don't think I'd ever really seen before in the way that it was done. I mean, I've seen that kind of thing before, but it was just cool. The guy's eyes and the way he moved, and it was interesting. And I go, well, I want to know more about the parasite tick thing. I want to know more about that, so maybe someday we can get Adventures of the Tick Person on a cartoon on Disney Plus when they eventually buy Netflix or something, and we can have Dave Filoni write stories about the tick bounty hunter or something. I don't know. I'm rambling now. Somebody kick in.
Well, instead of that, we got some gay alien action. So that at least checks some boxes. Brian, from the podcast, I know you have to get going. Is there anything you want to say in terms of final thoughts, and where can people find you?
No, you know what? You guys check out Rebel Moon if you have a Netflix subscription. If you do not, don't bother. You can find us on our main channel. We did put out another history. It's not getting any views, which is not really surprising, because it's not our main audience. But if you are interested in the story of Roald Dahl and the whole Willy Wonka franchise, we did a deep dive where we go all the way back to the beginning of Roald Dahl's life, all the way to this latest movie, and we just show the entire thing, and it's really quite inspiring and fun and clever. And check it out on the main channel. And then, of course, we'll be back next Wednesday for our show on Unleashed. All right.
Yep. All right, Brian. Thank you so much. Have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, all that good stuff.
Thanks, bros. Merry Christmas, everyone. Bye-bye.
All right,
all of this stuff. That way I don't have to remember anything for December. So that's everything, everybody.
Oh, is Festivus on there?
Festivus for the rest of us.
Oh, I forgot. I'm fired. Sorry, I forgot.
Well, guys, there was a lot of stuff going on in this movie that I wanted to talk about. The biggest thing is that, so first of all, Seven Samurai had 3 hours to basically tell its story. So we got like the first half of it setting up all the different samurai, and then the second half, which was defending the town. And in this one, Zack Snyder capped it in at like 2 hours and 10 minutes, which is kind of like around what Batman versus Superman was. And I just feel like, if you're going to be on a streamer, just frickin', like Scorsese got 3 hours to tell The Irishman,
Right.
So he's not, like, one of the problems with Snyder is that he doesn't know how to stick to like kind of like a regular movie structure. So like his stuff is always either too bloated, which means it's too long and too indulgent, or it's too truncated, where it cuts out stuff that's important to the plot and ends up not making any sense. And so you would think with Netflix, he'd be like, okay, I'm going to take my time. I'm going to, I could do 2.5 hours. I could do 3 hours. I could go with Kurosawa. So I wanted to get your guys' take on, like, what did you think the runtime of this was? Because it seems like a lot of critics are saying that the first part on the planet was good enough, but then the middle of the movie, where they're doing all the recruiting, is where the movie really falls apart. And then by the time you get to the end, you just don't care about the big climax in the third act. So I want to get your guys' take on, like, just the structure of this movie and why you think Snyder decided to, do it this way. Odin, what's your take?
No, I think that's a good assessment of it. That if I had to rank if we were to break this movie into 3 parts, I think the first part is absolutely the strongest. Second would be, I would argue, just the weakest. But then that leads to a very disappointing conclusion too. And I think that, again, it comes back to, and that's the most frustrating part about all of this, is why did Zack Snyder choose to do that? Well, he apparently, as you said, apparently said something that the movie itself is almost an entirely different movie compared to the extended edition R-rated cut. Or at the very least, it seems like it might have been even existing on an alternate timeline as far as how different it is. And so I think that ultimately, no matter what happens in that extended version, I think what we're going to get are a bunch of just arbitrary random decisions that Zack Snyder is always throughout his entire career been notorious for, right? Because he is a visual director. That's pretty much all he cares about. That's pretty much all he focuses on, is what does the big image actually look like. He does not spend a lot of time, and it's very clear if you spend just 5 seconds thinking about just any of the stories that he crafts on film, that he barely takes any time to try to talk about any of those smaller moments that are always so important to a good movie, how things connect from one to the other, how you get from point A to point B. For him, it's all about how do you get from point A to point Z and skip several different letters along the way. I'm kind of reminded of this song because my son, who's 3, who's a toddler, loves these like super simple songs, is what they're called. And there's a version of that called ABC Quack and ABC Boo. So it's almost like the final version where it's like every letter is boo and you're not getting an actual letter. That's basically what this honestly feels like, is that everything's just jumping around. And I think it's just because he can't write. And I think that we're once again seeing that on full display.
You know, Joe, one of the interesting things about this movie is that Zack Snyder has become his own cinematographer. He's bragged about how he made his own lenses for these cameras to get like a certain type of look.
So he's James Cameron now.
and you know, Snyder as a cinematographer has been widely criticized for being like, you know, for his muted color palette, making things too dark, stuff like that. Do you think Snyder would be better served if he had like an actual DP that he was working with, as opposed to him pulling double duty as cinematographer and director?
It's hard to say that. If he loves this color palette and he loves the movies he's making visually, then I can't criticize him. You make the movies you want to make. Would we as the audience probably benefit? Yes, I think that would probably help us in terms of something where all of his movies don't sort of look alike. So for the viewer, I'm sure there would be a benefit. Would he hate it? He might. He might look at bright colors and more of a varied visual palette as bad, because maybe he just loves this and that's his fetish. And hey, knock your fetish out, go for it. Would we as the viewers benefit? Yeah, I think so. And I also think maybe he shouldn't be writing his own movies. That might be the biggest benefit we could get. You know, I'll take the muted palette if the story's good. I don't want both to be not quite great. So I'd rather him get a writer in ahead of a DP, but sure, I would be interested to see what it be, because he does obviously know how to direct things. He can make visually interesting set pieces. We all saw things in this movie that we liked and thought were interesting, even if the whole movie didn't work for everybody. So it's not like he's utterly without talent. So yeah, I'd like to see him paired up with somebody else to rein him in a little bit or suggest new ideas that he can't just reject out of hand. Sure, why not?
Well, you know, Matt Vader, speaking of writers, so this movie, he actually collaborated with 2 writers that he's worked with in the past. One of them wrote 300, but he also wrote the sequel to 300, which wasn't based off of any source material. Mm-hmm. And then he also wrote John Wick Chapter 4. This other writer who wrote Atomic Blonde and a few other things. So like he's teamed up with writers in the past, but these writers aren't very good. Mm-hmm. And so like they kind of like let him kind of dictate like what goes into it. And I've seen a lot of reviews online about how bad the dialogue is, how bad the exposition dumps are in this movie. What's your take on the writing in this film?
Oh, dude, that's like asking a freaking slow person about calculus. I don't know anything about writing. I just know, you know, I generally, for the most part, enjoy Zack Snyder films. I like 300. I like the sequel. I liked a lot of the superhero, the DC stuff that he did. I understand it's garbage. There's just something about this film in particular where it just feels like I'm watching bad fan fiction and retreads of other movies that I've already seen and liked a lot more. You know, I'm not a writer. I don't know anything about writing. I just know that it's not good. It's not good writing, because when somebody like me, who is not good with English, and I'm probably dyslexic and all these other things. When I can spot it, when I can see it, that there's issues in these things, then I'm sure it probably drives somebody like you, who is an author and writes books and does all these things, that it probably drives you crazy. So I get it. Like it needs to work. It needs a lot of work. It needs some polish. It needs somebody to go over these things and fix it. You're right. He needs good writing partners to go into these things and help him along the way. I mean, I'm a visual guy. Odin was saying that he has this visual look. You can tell a Zack Snyder movie by the color palette and all this kind of stuff. I genuinely enjoy those films. I'm a guy who watches movies with his eyes, and I kind of like to turn my brain off and just eat my popcorn like a zombie when I go into a theater. And like I said, when I can spot these glaring problems, then the movie's got a lot of issues. So I'll just leave it at that. So,
Odin, one of the biggest things about this movie seems to be the critical reaction to it, where the critics have been overwhelmingly slamming it, and in particular, like, they seem to want to attack Snyder specifically. But one of the things I found interesting was that John Campea, the shilliest of shills, the guy who was one of Zack Snyder's biggest proponents, publicly comes out and says that this is not a good movie. And when you lose Campea, it's almost like getting a 1 on IGN. It's very rare that happens. So I want to get your take on the critical response to this movie. Do you think the critics are correct in their criticisms?
This time around, I would say absolutely they are. It's not very common these days where both audiences and critics are in line. And I think that if you were to look at any website's audience score, for instance, it's always going to be skewed in either direction, because just as many Snyder Bros that are on there putting their 5-star reviews, there's just as many detractors and people who hate him putting their 1-star, half-star reviews. So all in all, I think that it means most of those public forums, those public sites where it's very easy to do that, you're probably getting whatever that actual score is. It's probably accurate, because those two really do kind of cancel each other out in a lot of ways, because you have a lot of passion on both sides. But I think that there probably are enough people out there who would kind of look at this movie and say, I was mindlessly entertained by it. And I think that because of that, you will still have somewhat of a disagreement between those two factions. But in this regard, I think that most of the critical reaction to this film is accurate. But I also think that they've always been accurate when it comes to Zack Snyder films, because I don't think any of his films have ever really been any good. And there's films that I used to even like. I used to like 300. I know that was mentioned earlier. And there's some parts that obviously I still absolutely love in that movie because they're just so iconic. But I remember watching that maybe 5-6 years ago, and it had been the first time in years that I'd watched it. And I remember I was like, wow, I'm so bored by this now. I just for some reason just could not get into it nearly as much. It didn't age well for me. And I think that that's the issue, is that some of the films that were his best haven't really aged that well over time. And so, yeah, I think the critics, though, in this instance are definitely spot on.
Well, Joe, one of the big criticisms that has almost become a meme of Zack Snyder is his use of slow motion. And stylistically, I don't mind it. I tend to be a big fan of slow motion sequences. So when he uses slow motion, I'm fine with it. But a lot of people are getting really sick of his overuse of slow motion. They're saying this movie could have been an hour and a half if he just cut out all the slow motion, did regular timed action scenes. And some people even said the slow motion action scenes felt even longer than usual because I just didn't care what was happening, right? So what's your take on this criticism that Zack Snyder overuses slow motion in his movies?
There's a couple things. If you don't like slow motion, I advise not watching Zack Snyder films, because obviously he likes it and he's going to keep using it. So I don't know what to tell you there. Again, that's his choice as a director. I didn't find it to be too bad in this one compared to some other ones. I feel like he has overused it for my taste in other films more. I think, as I said earlier, some of the weirdness of the slowness was in some of the normal action sequences that weren't slowed down seemed slow because almost like they were rehearsing the scene, they just kept it in. So I'd rather those be sped up, and maybe that would trim 30 minutes off. I don't know. But we already have a movie that feels, as everybody has said, very rushed in the middle. I don't know that you're going to be able to fix that with just stopping slow-mo. That's not the key problem. I think the slow motion is fine. unless you hate it, in which case, again, these are not your movies. The problem here is the rushedness of the storytelling, not the slow-mo of the action sequences. That is not this movie's problem, in my opinion, anyway.
You know, one of my big criticisms of Zack Snyder and the way he writes is that he comes up with set pieces that he wants to film. He's like, oh, I have a vision of a guy riding a griffin. I have a vision of a Sith fighting a giant spider. I have a vision of a guy jumping in midair and throwing a spear at a spaceship. You know, like he comes up with these set pieces that he wants to make, and then he tries to shove them into the narrative, right? Now, they're beautiful set pieces. They're memorable, but they just don't make any sense within the context of the story. Now, Matt Vader 74, you are a visual guy. You love spectacle. Are there any set pieces in this movie that you actually enjoyed?
I think you just described a couple of them. You know, I mean, I can't sit here and judge Zack Snyder on his visual stuff. I quite enjoy most of it. Like I said earlier, I like his weird color palette that he likes to use. I really kind of like how he uses a lot of weird slow motion and stuff. And you know, I don't have any issue with any of that stuff. I liked the horse bird scene with not Perseus. You know, it was fun. It was interesting. You know, so I have the CGI and all the special effects in this thing are top level. It's the one good thing I think I can say about this movie. It's like Joe was saying, this movie, it fails on a writing level. He's just retelling stories that we've all already seen, you know, with real hollow and fake characters that we can all pluck out of other films. But visually, it's fine. Even though the stuff that he's making cool looking is he also ripped off of other things like the giant capital ship. You know, we've all seen these and other things, but he made them look really cool. So yeah, I mean, the rebel leader that we got to meet for 5 minutes of the show, flying through the air with the spear, that was cool. It's like, okay, but that's all I can say without spoiling it, I guess. So yeah, I mean, yeah, visually, it's a pretty film. It's the only way I could give this thing any positive thoughts. You know, I can give it, you know, 1.5 stars extra for being pretty. You know, especially the giant space vagina at the very beginning. It's like I immediately felt a little funny when I saw that. I go, oh, it's gonna be one of those.
It
kind
did
of
look
movies.
like a vagina.
Yeah, giant space vag. Yeah,
giant space. Space vagina.
Yep.
So one of my biggest issues with the movie was the characterization. Right, none of these characters have character arcs. This is especially true when it comes to the main character of Cora. It's played by Sofia Boutella. The reason that Star Wars worked so well is that Luke had a journey, right? He had a hero's journey. He went from being like a naive kind of like farm boy to becoming the savior of the galaxy. With Sofia Boutella, like she's already the badass Mary Sue, right, at the beginning of the movie. And she doesn't change throughout the course of the film. She has no arc. So there's nothing to really connect the audience to her. And in addition to that, there's no real stakes at play. It's like, oh, they're going to save their village by recruiting these people. But like at the same time, it's like we don't have a reason to care about what happens at the village, and we don't even get to know most of these characters. In fact, Ray Fisher's character, Blood Axe, is introduced at the end of Act 2. He's the last guy recruited to the team, and then by the time the movie's over, it's like he's gone, right? So you know you don't even get to know him all that much, and so like everything building up to the third act climax of this film just feels like a waste of time. Like there's ways where they could have maybe, you know, brought these things to or condensed these things into like a couple of scenes that would give you time to get to know some of these characters or give us some insight into their motivation. We don't even get a conversation between Cora and Kai, who's Charlie Hunnam's character, the Han Solo character, until right before Act 3 starts. So like we don't even get to know him, right? So Odin, I want to throw this to you, like as a connoisseur of cinema, as someone who's seen lots of films done right, how is it that Zack Snyder just doesn't know how to write characterizations or character arcs or even have anything that's driving the action forward?
As I had mentioned earlier, it's because of the fact that he is this visual director, because that is where his mind and his focus are at almost all times. And I would say that, because I know James Cameron was mentioned earlier, that it's very similar, in my opinion, to modern day James Cameron. I think Cameron is definitely a better writer in comparison. I think that, no one's going to necessarily say that, that Snyder has any edge on him in that department. But as far as like their actual style, because the Avatar films, for instance, I hate. Anyone who knows me, who's been following me for any time, knows I just cannot stand those movies. And a lot of it's because I just think the writing is atrocious. The story, it's more so the story that's atrocious more so than anything else there. But with Snyder, it's very similar in that because he's focusing so much on his visuals, so much on those big picture items, he does not focus on the actual writing itself. And so I think it's more of just his own doing, because he has this cool idea in his mind and he says, I want to see that. Okay, how do I get that? Okay, I guess I have to have some characters that, fit the bill, that fit, what I'm trying to actually put out there. How do they get there? Okay, whatever. I'll try to think of something. But like, it's almost like his main idea is the big picture. And then everything else, story-wise, is just him trying to force himself to write something down, to get something put down so that he can get to that final product, so he can get to that final big visual. And again, it's a problem that a lot of these visual directors end up having. But I think Zack Snyder's issue is that sometimes those visuals, because y'all were talking about visual effects, I think there's a lot of good visual effects in this movie. I think there's some very good designs. I think that there's also just good renderings. But there's also those moments, right? The tentacles were just atrociously, laughably bad. But there's also a moment at the very beginning when those ships are starting to land on the planet for the first time. And I thought, oh man, I've seen better graphics. And I know that you're not a big fan of the Firefly series, but I thought there were better effects in, almost Firefly or Serenity, or at the very least, a better use of effects. Because that's the other distinction too, is it's one thing to have good or bad effects. It's also one thing to have good or bad use of said effects. And I think because so many of them overuse effects, I like to call those films CGI fest, where it's like you have all this and you don't really need it. You could be using practical, you could be using a mixture, but instead you decided to go all CGI and it just doesn't look good. It just looks fake. Not because it's badly rendered, but because it's no matter what you do, it's going to be visual. Whatever you do is going to be computer generated, and you're never going to be able to get past that fully. So anyway, yeah, that's just my spiel about him and visual effects, but also why that impacts his writing.
Joe, one of the biggest criticisms levied at this movie is the fact that it uses too much exposition. And it's kind of ironic because like there's that whole thing where, everyone says that Zack Snyder's a visual director and the oldest rule in storytelling is show, don't tell. But he has at least 3 separate moments in this movie where he stops the narrative to go to flashback mode, where it's just these huge exposition dumps where he's showing you like what happens and like beautiful slow motion and all this other stuff. But people are just like, why am I getting this exposition dump at this point in time? Did you notice that when you were watching the movie? And why do you think Zack Snyder feels that this exposition is showing and not telling?
Yeah, it definitely, there were moments that stuck out because they were oddly kind of stuck in between what otherwise was sort of an organic scene. And I think that's the problem is I'm not a director or a writer or anything. I'm just a, idiot saying things on the internet. But to me, the way you do something like that is I've seen it where you have the modern scene that then blends into the one from before. And that's how you show that, okay, this has influenced what's happening now. The way it's done here is very, very harsh at times, not always, but there's these harsh like stops, like you said, it just stops everything. And we go back and we get an explanation. And so, yes, there were moments where that did feel like it derailed the movie. And this is, again, where I have to say, I am curious what his cut will be like. Maybe these things were done to the movie. And he had a little provision saying, you could do whatever you want, Netflix. Tell me to cut it to whatever length you want. I'll do it, but my version's going to come out and it's going to be the way I want it. Maybe it will be better, again, like a Snyder cut. I would think it would have to be. It can't be more weirdly edited than this, in my mind. If it is, wow, I almost want to see it for that too. But yeah, it did. There were odd moments for sure.
Matt Vader 74, a lot of the great franchises in history, whether it be science fiction or fantasy, are often judged by how good their bad guys are. And you're a big guy, unlike like you love the bad guys. What was your take on the bad guys in Rebel Moon? Do you think that they live up to the legendary standard?
Man, I don't know. The main bad guy, the admiral, I don't know, is he an admiral? They really tried hard to make people dislike this guy. You know, everything from the taking the bath with the tentacle creature to the way he just like kills people with his walking stick. Just everything about there's nothing to like about this guy. You know, he's clearly supposed to be playing the Anakin Darth Vader type character, but he's missing something there. And I think there was always something about Darth Vader that made me wonder what was behind the mask. Does that make sense? Even when he first gets introduced, when he walks onto that ship and he goes, "Find those plans," blah blah blah, you know, and he's like, "Oh, this guy, he's pretty cool." You know, when Darth Vader first walks out, I mean, that one scene changed my life as a 7-year-old kid. I'm like, who in the hell is this guy? You know, and the way they, over the course of 6 movies, fleshed his character out, made him more and more endearing to people who love that character. This guy just comes on the screen, and there's nothing there other than just hatred. I don't like him because he's just an evil piece of shit. You know, and there's nothing. There's no mystery about him. Does that make sense? I'm not really sure how else to explain that, where you hope this guy dies a very painful and agonizing death at the end of this movie or at the end of the next one or whatever. But I never felt that way about Darth Vader or Anakin. You know, I had something in here for those characters that I just don't have for this character. So there's something missing there. What that is that's missing, I don't know if I can explain it, but there you go.
Good one. Got a couple of super chats I want to call out real quick. We got Mr. Bug for $10. Rebel Moon is like cake. It's got nice frosting, but no cake. The movie is just a plate with one brownie and covered in cake frosting.
Okay.
A lot of empty calories in Rebel Moon.
That's
That's accurate. I agree. That's accurate.
Yeah. Then we got a members chat from Danny the Dork Knight, member for 10 months. Thank you, Danny. I haven't watched any of those worst movies of 2023, so I feel pretty lucky about that. LOL. Well, they're going to be coming fast and furious towards the end of the year, so be sure to buckle in. And we got Ryan for 50 euros. 50.
Nice.
It seems there is nothing new under the sun when it comes to sci-fi. Rebel Moon is an unoriginal story masquerading as original. The only good sci-fi seems to be Dune, and adapted from a book that's 60 years old. Can anyone write a good sci-fi anymore? You know, it's kind of funny. The way my brain works is while I was watching Rebel Moon, I kept rewriting it in my head where I was like, they should have done this in this scene. They should have done this in this scene. That would have set this up better. And it's kind of funny because when Charlie Hunnam's character kind of like agrees to shuttle them to different planets at the cantina scene, I just chalked that up as bad writing. I was like, well, there's nothing in it for him. He just needs to do this because the plot demands that he does this. Otherwise, the story can't advance. And that's typical Zack Snyder writing. You know, it's just like, I want the plot to do this. Therefore, the characters have to do this. Right. And then by the time we got to the end, there's a little twist at the end. I'm like, oh, okay. So it wasn't bad writing. The bad writing was just a red herring to throw me off. They had actually planned to do this thing at the end, which kind of caught me by surprise. So like I was entertained by that, which is one of the reasons why I had fun watching the movie. But upon further, inspection, like this movie just has plot logic holes and writing problems all over the place. We got Rec Films Montana member chat for 5 months. Thank you, Rec Films. Okay, strange thought. What happens if the Snyder Cut rocks? The Snyder Cuts of all of his movies have always been better than the actual theatrical releases. So like, I wouldn't be surprised if like Snyder's take on this was better, my question is, why didn't Netflix force this on him? Why not just put out what he originally envisioned to begin with, right? Or at least stretch it out over like a mini series, right? Where you have episodes that you can like do, where you can get more watch time out of. Because Odin, correct me if I'm wrong, Rebel Moon costs about $200 million to make. Is that?
It sounds about right, because when it comes to movies like this, I am always a little bit more hesitant to even start looking into that information, because profitability becomes a huge question mark. So 166 million is what's being reported, and that is apparently shared with Part 2 in some way, according to Vanity Fair, I should say.
Yeah.
On my thoughts on this question, I was just going to say, if the Snyder cut of this is good, then we will sit here on this panel on a Saturday morning and we'll say, hey, I enjoyed this a lot more than I enjoyed the PG-13 version of this movie. And if you have any kind of honesty about you, then that's what you'll say. So,
and I hope it does. I hope it does. I would like to see a better version of this.
I would too.
Yeah.
I won't hold my breath. And it's just because the one experience that I do have with an actual dedicated Snyderverse film was Justice League. And though I will agree it's better than the original Justice League, I still can't say that it's actually a good movie. That's the tough thing, is that I think sometimes we get caught up in that, saying, well, so much better than this. Yes, doesn't necessarily mean that it's good, though.
Right.
Yeah, but my point with Odin there was that I know that because of the movie Red Notice with The Rock and Ryan Reynolds and Gal Gadot, someone at Netflix talked about how they gauge whether or not a $200 million movie was worth the investment. And it comes down to a certain number of hours of watch time. And so if Rebel Moon, this version, can guarantee something like, I think it's like 2 million hours of watch time or something like that, then the investment for Netflix pays off. And then like once you have Part 2 come out, even if it's less, like, that investment pays off over time. So
maybe that's why they did it too, was to have more people watch it, because they know there's going to be a second one, like not just a Part 2, but a second cut of the movie itself.
Yes. All right, then we got a super chat for $10 from Late Night with Cap, JT Gunn. Thank you, JT. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you and the panel. 2024 goals for the channel. Is 24 the year of the Vader butt tattoo? LOL. Oh,
50,000 subs. 50,000 subs by January 31st. Maybe I'll think about it.
But we got some goals for the channel. We're going to be switching up our formats a little bit. We're going to be doing more live streams and all that good stuff. And we'll give you guys an update next month for the new year. But we got a lot of stuff in the pipeline that we're really excited about. And then $10 from the Popcast Unleash. Merry Christmas, my salty brothers. One last joke of the season. Why is Santa so jolly? And then the answer is in a $5 super chat, because he knows where all the naughty girls live.
That's right.
Yes, face palm from Odin on that one. And Shorty Short, member for 4 months. Thank you, Shorty. Speaking of Samurai, Blue Eye Samurai is amazing. It is. It's probably the best thing I've seen all year. I love that show. Yeah, it's really freaking good. Then we got Zod Lander for those crones, 100 crones. In my opinion, Snyder can build a great visual, but he seems to need to see past replace with CGI and use it to enhance visuals. CGI, in my opinion, is a tool to enhance, not replace. In my opinion, that is the big problem.
Agreed.
Facts.
There were some practical effects in here, and when they were on screen, it looked better. But in particular, like the Squid World, where like the rebels were hiding out at the end, that thing looked like a Commodore 64 Tron level like CGI crap fest. Like,
was the tick real?
Really bad.
Was the tick thing?
No, that was definitely CGI. But like you said, Vader, that was probably one of the more original aspects of the show. Yeah. And I was like, where's more of this stuff? Like that would have been cool if they had to recruit that guy. Like that would have been kind of interesting to me. And then we got a member chat from OTO for 2 months. Thank you, OTO. Should have just given us the full cut of Rated R Rebel Moon. Things seem missing, like the evil guy who tried to save Sammy, and I want Robot Wars. I
forgot about that guy. That's right. That guy was at the beginning. And the robot, which the robot had more character growth than anybody. That robot, I was like, oh, I get him immediately. And then he's basically gone.
Disappeared till the very end. Yeah.
So there was an evil soldier, right, who was part of the evil soldier group, who tried to stop the raping from happening.
Mm-hmm.
And he ended up turning on his fellow soldiers and helping Cora defeat them. And then he just disappears for the rest of the movie. Like, he was in the first 10 minutes and then he's just gone. Like, they didn't recruit him. He didn't like come aboard. He didn't bond with Cora about like, abandoning their oath to the mother world or whatever. Just gone. Just totally dropped that story thread. Secondly, the robot's name is Jimmy. That's the name of the robot, Jimmy. They literally named
all
him
called Jimmys
Jimmy.
too. So it's like,
Yeah,
but
they say
he's
we got a Jimmy.
yeah,
So that must
he's
stand
voiced
for-
by Sir Anthony Hopkins,
Mhm.
and it's just the robot Jimmy, who at the end has antlers on for some reason.
Yeah.
oh yeah.
I mean, clearly the robot's going to play a bigger role in part 2.
director's cut. It'll explain where the antlers come from. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll get more of that in part 2, and I'm sure maybe the soldier will be back in part 2 as well, because him and
That's what I would guess.
the girl that was gonna get the R word to her, him and her are probably gonna get married and have babies and stuff. So who knows.
Also, I'm pretty sure that like I have a theory about who that girl is and what her importance is. I'm pretty sure I'm right because Zack Snyder is not very creative.
Is she
Oh,
somebody's
all right.
sister?
The girl of the village.
Yes, the water girl.
Okay.
All right, guys. So
Bobby
enough
Boucher
talking about
is-
Rebel Moon. We could probably talk about Rebel Moon for hours upon hours, but let's talk about our good friends over at Film Threat, who just released their first part of a big expose about the fall of John Lasseter. Now, for those of you who don't know, John Lasseter was basically the guy who made Pixar back in the day, and he subsequently got Me Too'd out of his position at Pixar and Disney. And basically, this really excellent article over on Film Threat, by the way, links to everything we talked about today are in the description, is the first part of a series of articles that kind of talk about how Disney basically vilified John Lasseter, kicked him to the curb, and the forces within Disney that have taken over and continue to drive it down into the gutter. I know that Chris Gore has been very vocal about what's been going on over at Disney and why it's detrimental to the company. In fact, we had a big article come out this week where it says like Disney realized that going woke was probably the wrong strategy. And we're all sitting here as like, we've been saying that for years. Like, why are you just catching up with this now? So I wanted to get your take on this. Odin, what was your take on how John Lasseter was basically targeted by forces within Disney?
Yeah, I mean, I have not had a chance to actually read through the article. I just want to, of course, shout out to Film Threat and to Chris Gore and all the work that he's doing over there, because I know it's been getting a lot of buzz, and knowing what I know about Chris, I know that it's going to be really just good work and good quality coming from Film Threat in general. So what I do know just about the general case is that I just think it's so ridiculous that you would have somebody who is so clearly a creative mind and knows what he's doing and has years and years and years of experience, and to do what you did to the guy by basically just driving him out of town on a rail for, at the very least, questionable accusations is one of the dumbest decisions that they've made. And it very much shows, because when you look at especially Pixar animation during the John Lasseter era, and you look at it now post John Lasseter, it's just night and day. You have some of the same names because he wasn't alone. He had other people that were working with him. And, now that I have, my 3-year-old toddler who is been, watching movies and will watch, different animated films and such. And how many times I see John Lasseter is just kind of amazing, right? Because you're like, oh man, he's connected to WALL-E. He's connected to, pretty much everything that they did. I think even in the early 2D animations as well. I want to say I saw his name for the newest film that he's now a fan of, The Emperor's New Groove. So there's just so many movies that he has his fingerprints on. And so just to have someone who has that experience, but also clearly that talent level to be able to get a story together, to keep it together, it is honestly, it helps to explain a bit about why Disney is now in the state that it is. Because when you have someone as creative and as talented as him, and then you boot him for various reasons, and you don't try to find someone that's going to be of equal talent, or at least somewhat of equal talent, maybe a few people, to add up to him, then guess what? You're going to have a myriad of terrible releases. And now they're at the point where even their animated films, which used to be guaranteed hits, guaranteed break even at least, even in the worst case scenario, they're now all flopping. Every single one of them. And that I did that breakdown last few weeks, just how much money Disney has lost. And it's amazing because every film, except for one, and even then it's still not a guarantee that it even made anything, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, all of them lost money. Every single one. And when you say and recognize every kids movie, every family film they've released has also lost money, I think that the John Lasseter story just becomes that much more prominent. And this probably was the sign of the beginning of the end of Disney's reign.
Yeah, Matt Vader, it was kind of interesting because John Lasseter was so instrumental to the success of Pixar. Like, he was really the creative vision behind all of their hits. He's the one who helped them redefine what animation was and what family entertainment was. And that was one of the reasons why Disney decided to acquire them from Apple, or Steve Jobs, I should say. And it was under Lasseter's reign that, Pixar started off their tenure with Disney really well. But by the time he got Me Too'd, there's literally an excerpt in this article that talks about how one of the female creatives that Lasseter often gave a hard time because her ideas weren't very good, basically said, "Can we now get a woman running things in here?" And I think it was Chrissy Mayer, or that Star Wars girl, who basically said, all these women who are now running things into the ground have proven women shouldn't be in charge of stuff. And I know that for us, individual cases, there are very competent and talented women out there, but by and large, this idea of women being in power just because they're women has, what's your take on how well they've been doing, especially when it comes to Pixar and Marvel and other Disney properties?
I hate you with a burning fire. I don't know how to respond to that. My mind just immediately goes to Kathleen Kennedy. She's supposed to have all these great ideas and be the super producer, yet she obviously can't run something like Star Wars without just turning it into a complete and total pile of crap. So, I don't know, man. I don't know how to comment on that question. There's plenty of women out there that are competent and can run businesses and companies. I'm married to one. I love my wife. She's super confident and very smart girl. But she does a job that I couldn't do. At the same time, I do a job that she couldn't do. I don't know how to answer your question. I'm very sorry, Matt. It's just I think I need to have some bourbon for me to answer this question the way you want me to answer this question. You're trying to bait me into saying some stuff about the fairer sex of the people on this planet with us. So I'm not going to play your game today. I'm not going to do it.
I just find it interesting.
I'll play.
I'm going to throw this to Joe. I find it interesting that in this expose, they talk about how under Lasseter's leadership, Pixar was a very welcoming place. It was very conducive to creativity. People actually enjoyed, being there, and it was overall a positive environment with which to create. Even though Lasseter could be very pointed in his criticisms of stuff, and then once he got ejected, and the focus became more about, DEI and diversity and inclusion and the message as opposed to the entertainment. Then it became a very toxic work environment. People don't like working there. Their movies started to suffer. Their movies started to get worse. Why do you think Disney and Pixar keeps perpetuating the stuff that doesn't work, that's losing them money, as opposed to maybe saying maybe we should just hire Lasseter to come back and right the ship?
Because Disney is led by unimaginative people who do not understand what creativity involves. And sometimes you hear stories about writers' rooms where you have freedom to say any idea, and if it's funny, it works. If it works for the story, it works. Otherwise, you throw it out. That doesn't work for people who are looking at, all the marketing material. Oh, we test well with this group. We have to test with this group. We're missing these groups of people. We have to bring them in. And that's how they're making all their creative decisions. And once you get to that point, when everything is run off an Excel sheet and test audiences and what demographic we think we can capture by just doing this one thing, which actually doesn't serve the story or the audience, but it looks good on a poster, it's the beginning of the end. And that's where you are. And to Odin's point, I don't believe that nobody could replace Lasseter. You can replace them, but you wonder, why aren't these people coming to Disney? It's not going to be because they don't want to work on high money, high dollar, interesting IPs that they grew up with. It's probably because they've heard how it is to deal with the executives and the leadership and what they want and what they're going to tell you you have to do. You just look at Marvel movies and how a lot of those, when you talk to these directors who are like, well, I work on the Marvel formula. This is what we're allowed to do and what we're not to. That's Disney as a company. That's everything is, here's how you have to do it, whether you're creative or not. Some people are going to be okay with that, but generally the people who have the most creative vision, the most artistic merit to what they're trying to express and say and get people together who feel like they can do whatever they want, they're not going to thrive under that. They're going to start doing their own thing, or they'll go find somebody who's lower than Disney and says, oh yeah, we'll throw less money at you, but you can do whatever you want and see if it works or not. I think that's where we are, is Disney is just not good at managing creative output anymore.
I think that's completely accurate. Anyway, guys, be sure to check out that expose on Film Threat. It is really excellently written. It's a very interesting article. I know that that Chris Gore lended a lot of personal anecdotes from his experience dealing with people from Pixar and stuff like that in there. So it's definitely worth checking out. And it's just the first part. Like, they got a lot more planned. So stay up to date on that. And real quick, we got a super chat from Zodlander for 50 crones. Thank you, Zod. I read the Film Threat article. It's a bit depressive. It feels like it hits the reality in a hard way. Well, they don't hold back. They definitely did their research. They interviewed people who were at the company. And this is basically the reality of what Pixar is nowadays. And you're right, it is depressing. It's very depressing. And speaking of Marvel, which Joe brought up, let's talk a little bit about Kevin Feige's plan for the X-Women, formerly known as the X-Men. So, guys, we have this article that kind of takes into account a bunch of rumors that have been circulating lately, that Kevin Feige's reboot of the X-Men, he wants it to be different from what Fox did. And so what's different from what Fox did? Making it female-focused. And so basically the X-Men in the upcoming MCU are going to be about all the female characters of the X-Men. Like, if you liked any of the male X-Men, forget about it. It's not going to be, we're not going to have Wolverine. We're not going to have Cyclops. We're probably not even going to have Professor X. But we're going to have Storm. We're going to have Jean Grey.
Well, Professor Y, right?
Yeah, Professor Zim. But Kevin Feige, Odin, a while back, we got rid of Victoria Alonso, who everyone was pointing at as the person at Marvel who was responsible for the shift towards radical feminism and minimizing men and straight men and white men and all this other stuff in the actual MCU. And even though she's gone, it seems like Kevin Feige keeps doubling down on this stuff, even after the Marvels prove that this is the wrong path to be going down. What's your take on an all-female focused X-Men in the MCU?
It's showing us that nothing has ever been learned. And again, we've mentioned this before, that it's clearly showing that it's not about the money, it's about the message. And it's no truer than with Disney. They continue to make these various decisions, and they know that these decisions are not going to pay out for them. I mean, you look to a film like The Marvels, as you mentioned, right? It's going to lose well north of $200 million for Disney. That's all a part of the $1.5+ billion they're losing just on their theatrical releases from the year 2023 alone. You then take into account other projects that have tried something similar, and they just never work. The only time that you've had a project work, at least this past year, with what he's trying to do, which is, again, a female-focused, story demographic, was the Barbie film. But it's Barbie. Barbie has, from its very beginning, been a female-focused property, a female-focused brand, and they were able to market that film so well that people thought they were going to get a Barbie movie, and a lot of people came out of it thinking they got just that and really enjoyed it. I have my own issues with the film. I think that there were a lot of clear messaging things that somehow went over some people's heads, but I think that the fact that they are still trying to make this work and they still don't see it proves to me that they are activists. They are just activists, pure and simple. They don't actually care about creating something that's going to be good. They don't actually care about creating something that's going to be bringing people in to actually watch their product. And that's what drives me crazy, because they are the people that should be wanting profit, should be wanting to, build up their company and build up their portfolios and all these other things. And yet they continue to make these counterintuitive decisions. And if they have not learned that when you take a male-dominated IP, and no matter what you say, right, and this is me saying it to them, right, no matter what you say, Star Wars, X-Men, Marvel, those are male-dominated IPs as far as general interest are concerned.
Made for boys. Yep.
Exactly. Men for boys to men. Until you figure that out and stop trying to force that into people's movies and properties, guess what? You're going to continue to create loss after loss after loss after loss. And go ahead, make your X-Woman movie, make your X-Persons movie, because it's going to flop. You're going to once again have egg on your face, and hopefully, finally, it's going to be enough to make the shareholders, who really are the only ones at this point, it seems, that have any ability to do anything if they actually came together and acted together as a unit, to actually make change happen here.
Disney, to me, is just, the meme where the guy sits back with the bottle of popcorn and just that's all Disney is for me right now. Mm-hmm. It's just a show to watch the studio burn, because that's what they're doing. They're burning. When was the last time they made a movie that made money, Odin?
They did not, as I said, this
2 years ago.
This past year they did not make any. And oh goodness, last year I don't think I ever made a 2022 chart, but yeah, it's been at least a year, because they haven't made any this year.
It's like I canceled my Disney Plus live on this show last week for a reason, and I haven't missed it. I'm not gonna miss it. I might turn it back on at some point, maybe if that faction of crazies manages to get on the board of Disney, and they start making some changes over there. But until that kind of stuff happens, I have no interest in any of this. So,
and I have the one film. The last time they made profit was Avatar 2: The Way of Water.
Okay,
Disney's
that
just this year.
No, it came out last year, end of last year, and then it continued on into this year. So,
okay, well, that was a Fox movie anyway. You can't really count that. But I want to throw this to Joe. Joe, there's this thinking in Hollywood where it's like, if we change the demographics that are on our screen, the audience demographic will change to meet that, which means, like, if you want more women to see your movies, you put women in your movie. If you want more gay people to see your movies, you put more gay people in your movie. And that seems to have been Kathleen Kennedy's, strategy with trying to shift the demographics of Star Wars to broaden out the audience, but it's actually been alienating their core audience as opposed to bringing in the new audience. And it seems like Kevin Feige is of the same mentality, where it's like, if I just make things more female-centric, we'll get more of that female target demographic. Whereas, when it comes to male escapist fantasy, which is what superhero movies are, it's like the men want characters that they can emulate, and they want the fantasy of, like, the women, falling in love with them because they're so, like, awesome and powerful. Whereas, if you put the women on the screen, it's like, unless they're super attractive, and that's only going to last for like a couple minutes worth of, screen attention, nobody's going to care about these characters. And it seems that Kevin Feige, as much as he's tried to do this over the course of, like, post Endgame MCU, it just doesn't seem to be resonating with their actual audience, because women like to see hot guys on screen too, right? So what's your take on this strategy? Why do you think Kevin Feige just continues to insist that this is the right way for Marvel to go?
Well, I think the problem, and I've said this before, I think on this stream as well, is that you have to have a story that backs it up. You can't just put something there and say, this is now for you. That doesn't work. But in particular with the X-Men, I'm going to grab a visual aid very quickly from off screen here. With the X-Men, I have an original piece of my favorite X-Men character, who happens to be Storm in her Mohawk phase, where she didn't have powers and is objectively the best leader the X-Men ever had, because Cyclops sucks shit. So that's my opinion. But to your original question, sorry to derail it, if this is a good movie where the characters are good and rich, and the problem is just saying it's going to be all one thing or another. That's never been the X-Men. The X-Men have never been all one type of anything. The point of the characters was that they were a range. And it was the idea of misfits and people who were hated in society banding together and still trying to fight against that in whatever way worked for them. That's not a thing that you can just assign to one subset of those characters. So do whatever you want, Feige, I guess, but it better be a good story that people can connect with. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how good looking, bad looking, diverse, white, black, anything it is, nobody cares. And that's the lesson that isn't being learned, because there is a reason why people are tired of the Marvel formula. It's boring. Do something interesting, and I won't care what's on the screen. I just want something different.
Well, I think that's a perfectly logical way to go about doing things. Now, Matt Vader 74, before we get to you, I know that you don't want to be baited into anything, so I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you one last story topic for today, which is about the Warhammer 40K cinematic universe is now officially a go. I know that you were very disappointed with Rebel Moon, but it looks like Games Workshop, according to this article on IGN, Games Workshop has come to an agreement with Amazon Pictures to bring Warhammer 40K to the big screen and the small screen under the direction of executive producer Henry Cavill.
Sweet.
Now, I know that you're hungry for like new sci-fi fantasy properties to dig into.
Nervous. I'm a little nervous.
What's your take on the Warhammer 40K going full steam ahead at Amazon?
So I do have to say I am not super familiar with Warhammer 40K lore. I know there's dozens and dozens of books, source material, army books. I used to play Warhammer 40K. I had a really nice orc army, but that was it. I played orcs. I didn't have to care about the fluff and the lore and the history of all this kind of stuff, because I painted my guys and I put them under things and we just went out there and killed things. That's what orcs are all about in Warhammer 40K. I didn't have to care about the Primarchs and the Inquisitors and the demons and all this other stuff. But what I do know is that Warhammer 40K and Warhammer is just a massive, massive property. But it's not a huge IP we compared to something like Star Wars or Star Trek. It's a small niche gamer community out there that plays this game. So I'm a little bit worried that it's not going to quite have the pool to bring in the big hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that these studios I think are going to want. If they don't want that, then maybe we'll be okay. But it will be a very interesting, fun, and cool thing to explore. And if they let Henry Cavill do it correctly, then it's going to blow some people away. And if I am a little heartened by the fact that traditionally Games Workshop, the owners of Warhammer, they don't fuck around. They do not put up with people trying to soy up their properties. They're very strict about, these are the Sisters of Sigmar or whatever, and this is what they do. And these are they're not going to really put up with somebody coming in there and trying to social justice warrior up their property. If they do that, then they're going to have a huge problem, because it's going to be like putting a nuclear bomb in the gaming world, because the players won't put up with it either. They just won't. It'll be really ugly, because this property, the fans are, I mean, they would make the Snyder Bros look tame in comparison, I think, if they did end up fucking this world up with these movies. And I know Henry Cavill is a big fan, and I know he's like into the lore and he knows what he's doing here. And so personally, I have a lot of faith that they're going to be able to do it correctly, if they're able to do it at all. I don't know. I don't know if they're going to be able to pull it off yet. And I still feel like we're at least 2 or 3 years out from seeing anything. So I hope they do it. I hope they do it well. And I'm looking forward to it if that does happen. So it'll be a lot of fun.
All right, guys. Well, we had a lot to talk about today, and we talked about it. I want to thank everyone for being here, and I might even do another Rebel Moon video just to dive deep into how terribly written this movie is, even though I ended up enjoying it. But I want to thank my expert panel of nerds for being on here today. Odin, any final thoughts, and where can people find more of you?
Yeah, well, first to just add on to the Warhammer talk, because I'm not one who knows much about the lore either, but Henry Cavill attached as a producer, very, very promising, especially with everything that we know about how he butted heads with people behind the scenes on The Witcher. It shows that he actually does care a lot about source material being preserved and being respected, and so I think having him there will be very helpful. But they need a good director and a good writer. If they don't have either of those two things, he could be as close to source material as you possibly could be. But if you don't have a well-crafted movie, not only are you not going to likely be able to make fans happy, but also you're not going to bring anybody new in, and you kind of have to at least try to bridge that gap in some way. So I hope that they can do it. But with all that being said, you can find me over at OMB Reviews on YouTube, Odyssey, Rumble. I'm active on Twitter/X as well. And I should hopefully have a box office breakdown video up tomorrow with things not looking too great for Aquaman, looking to be another DC flop, which is fitting, and a fitting end to the DCEU universe that got established. And it's looking like Wonka might actually be that holiday darling that every year there's like one movie that does better than what maybe had been initially anticipated. It looks like Wonka's kind of doing that. So anyway, thanks for having me as always.
Thank you. And we will eat a pineapple pizza in your honor, my friend.
Sweet. Can't wait.
Joe Esposito from the Ozone Nightmare Podcast, thank you so much for being on today. Do you have any final thoughts, and where can people find more of you?
Well, luckily for everybody like me who, is easily entertained, it's all right above my head because I can't be bothered to remember any of this stuff. My brain does not have the room for it. As far as final thoughts, I would embrace bad movie lists because somebody else's bad movie could be one of your favorite yearly movies. I found many movies that are buried on how did they ever make this piece of crap? And I end up loving them. Many of them are in, by the way, support physical media behind me. Buy physical media, support creators. There you go. So these bad movie lists, look through them. Look for things that look weird and different and take a chance. Most of them will probably be pretty short. I don't take a chance on a 4-hour bad movie necessarily, but if they're shorter, watch them. You never know. There are movies I never thought I would watch 10 years ago. Now I love them. Something like Street Trash. I watch it every year. And most people would think that it's offensive and horrible. It's great. They're playing volleyball with a penis. It's awesome. So embrace these bad movie lists. There might be some gold in there.
All right. And Matt Vader 74, we have a super chat from Butter Biscuit 92 for $5. Vader, you coward. Just say SJWs are ruining things, LOL. Then you say Godzilla was a 3-star earlier. I'm questioning my support for this channel now.
Well, SJWs are ruining things. I mean, this is not a secret. I've been saying that for years now. I don't know why he would say that. And also, Godzilla is not a 3-star movie. Godzilla -1 is a 3.5-star movie. So, or 7 out of 10, something like that. That's a good score. It's a really good score. And you don't have to agree with me. That's fine. That's okay. That's what we do here. It's my opinion. If you don't like my opinion, that's too bad.
That's just like your opinion, man.
I know, right? It's my opinion. It's okay. You can have yours. I can have mine.
Hey, at least
and SJWs suck. So
at least you participate on Critic List in that discussion.
Yeah,
some other people.
Some people over here. Yeah, right. Critic List guys, go to criticlist.com. It's a lot of fun.
Don't listen to this guy. He doesn't post
It's a lot of
anything.
fun. Check it out. They deserve all our support. Much better than Rotten Tomatoes. It's a cool website and app for your phone. So check it out. You're probably going to ask me what we got going on this week, right?
I wasn't going to ask you because you don't know.
Well, I think I have an idea. I seem to remember us recording a tribute show to the 20th anniversary of Return of the King that I believe correct. Alex is editing. Is he still editing it? So that should be out.
He hasn't even started yet.
Well, he better crack that whip. Yeah. So we do have a end of the year tribute to the Return of the King coming out because it's the 20th anniversary of that amazing, awesome show.
Basically, everyone, we won't be having a Tuesday live stream next week. We're going to be releasing our review of Return of the King. But next Saturday, the last Saturday of 2023, we're going to have a special Salty Saturday extravaganza where we're going to max out our panelists with returning guests to talk about the year in review, and pretty much it's going to be a free flow. It's going to be Matt Bader's wet dream. We're not going to have any structured topics.
Yes, no structure.
Just going to be people. It's going to be FNT style, man. It's just
You're not going to sit there and bait me into like saying most women suck and should be making my sandwich in the kitchen. Is that what you're saying?
As long as there's no discussion on Twitch stuff, I might be okay.
Yes, and Mr. Reagan won't be here either.
Go make me a sandwich while naked by wearing nothing but that apron, naked apron sandwich. That's what
Naked
I want.
Apron Sandwich.
Let's go.
That'll be the name of the stream, Naked Apron Sandwich. All right, want to give a big shout out to everyone who gave us super chats during the stream. Mexican Iron Man, the Joker's Voice, Doomed Mr. Bug, Ryan, JT Gunn, the Popcast, Zodlander, and Butterbiscuit92. Thank you all so much for your support. It goes a long way towards helping out the channel. And we're looking forward to doing all the new stuff that we're planning on doing in 2024. Can't wait to share it with you guys. But be sure to tune in next Saturday, same salty time, same salty channel for another episode, the last episode of Salty Saturdays of 2023. Should be a really good time. The sandwich sounds unsanitary.
Yeah.
Indeed. And with that, stay unsanitary, my friends.